So by compartmentalizing, I used to watch this series around SWAT teams and how they are able to shut off their personal life, their wife at home, their kids, everything. Even their parents that might be suffering cancer or something, they can completely shut that off, go into a mission, perhaps kill people there, come back, shut the personal life switch back on, and forget about the mission, like completely. And we need to teach ourselves, condition ourselves, and we talk about mindfulness a lot, and that's probably the key, is becoming more mindful about your life and being extremely intentional when you leave your desk, for example, after work, if it's at your home, at your office, when you go down and you greet your kids, you do it wholeheartedly in family mode.
Hey everyone, welcome to the RLT podcast, where we share some real life tools, tips, and tricks to help you not only discover, but also reach your ultimate goals. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to a brand new week and a brand new episode of the Real Life Tips podcast. This is episode number 66. I'm your host, Manu.
66, Marnu. We're at episode 66. so happy to be here. You're joined by Leon, as usual. Man, it's a great day. It's a wonderful day. It's so cold outside and our weather is terrible, but dude, did we get great news in South Africa today.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's official. We finally don't have to wear masks anymore. How great is that?
Jeez, no, that's incredible news. I mean, I was actually considering this week finally shaving my beard because it's just starting to irritate with the mask so much, and now I don't have to do it anymore, man.
Yeah, and especially when you're wearing glasses or sunglasses or shades of any kind, it keeps fogging up as well, so you don't want to you don't want to deal with that anymore. It's so frustrating. I'm so excited.
It's crazy, man. I walked into the shop this morning on the way of dropping my kids at school, and I didn't know about the news.
Yeah.
So there's immediately like 4 or 5 people in the, like when we just started out with all of this, I walked in and then people will tell you, listen, guy, you must go get your mask. You forgot it. And these guys are all looking at me like, listen, guy, you don't need to wear a mask anymore. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? What did I miss? It's surreal.
It's gonna take us some time to get used to it. I think the most exciting news that I have, beyond just the fact that we don't have to wear a mask, is the fact that there's no limitation on gatherings anymore. And that is great news because I'm planning on having a kid soon. And I really, really want to do 1 or 2 metal festivals before then. So I'm really, really amped on that. We've been waiting for this day for such a long time. I was thinking
you're going to say metal festivals with a kid. I'm like, what?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I want to do it before I have a kid, without the responsibilities. Just have one silly weekend again, a whole weekend festival.
Yeah,
so I'm really, really stoked.
You have to. It's 7 years into my children now, and I've never been to a concert since. So a part of you dies when another one is born, So, but anyways, let's get to the topic of today.
Yeah.
Actually, I was thinking about that concept and how everything has changed in the last 3 years, and I'm not even going to, mention the C word and why. But I think everything in life has gotten a bit hectic, and it's not just for me, and it's not just, I thought maybe it's because of the age of my kids, maybe it's because of responsibility at work and finances increasing, or maybe getting bigger salaries and acquiring more stuff in your life. And I think it is all of those, but it's a combination, right? It's every area in life just seems to get so much more complicated and so much more loaded with stuff. And this is pretty much what we want to talk about today. Is we want to talk about overwhelm. I think we have touched on this in various episodes, but basically burnout and overwhelm, I think probably right now the highest levels of people experiencing burnout and overwhelm ever recorded in the world, right? And I find myself constantly on that verge of almost realizing that I'm burning out, or I'm overwhelmed. I can't get through to everything. And one thing that you know about me is I'm a qualitative type of person, not a quantitative person. I want to do fewer things and do them great, rather than doing multiple things and doing them half-assed,
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the biggest challenges for me. But basically what we want to try and talk about today is just to talk about this to you guys and some of the things and coping mechanisms that we've started, utilizing throughout experiencing this, and just have a little bit of an empathetic discussion here around what can we actually do about
Yeah,
this.
you're absolutely right, Leon. So today is going to be all about avoiding burnout and overwhelm. And I think it is so relevant considering even the topic that we covered in our last episode when we're talking about the financial climate and even just taking that in and of itself. There's so many other factors. But take that, for instance, just for a second, you know, the amount of people being laid off at massive corporations at the moment because of the current economic climate. What does that mean for those people leaving? You know, adding some more stress onto them because they've literally just found their feet in the organization, or maybe they've been working there for 10, 15 years. Now they have to readjust and go out in the job market again, get everything up. So they're adding more stress on top of that, on top of the complicated lifestyles that we're already living. Take the people that are left behind in those organizations. They're now absorbing so much more work to make up for the people that have just been laid off. So just taking the economic climate in and of itself, right? But add on top of that the situation of the current pandemic and everything going on there, and people are suffering. Friends, family closest to me are suffering still to this day because of the dip that we went through recently. And so all of that sort of falls on top of you as well, because you're feeling the pain of those closest to you. So I think taking all of the factors into consideration, how can we actually start addressing this? Because I've always seen myself as an extremely strong and disciplined person. I really, really have. I feel that I can always take on more. And that's always been my attitude. But I've recently hit a point as well where I just felt completely overwhelmed and burnt out, where I literally I was paralyzed by it. I found myself laying on the couch for an entire weekend, not wanting to touch anything, not wanting to speak to anyone, not wanting to do anything, just because of all the pressure pushing from each and every single angle. And so where is your limit? And when you've reached that limit, how do you get out of that? And how do you step back and say, this is too much. I need to take some time and recover from all of the demand of life.
And I think one of the biggest key things here is to see the warning signs early, because if you compare it to a balloon, right? If you're inflating a balloon, the bigger the balloon gets, the more majestic and the cooler it looks, you know. The same as you in your work. If you take on more stuff and you just help everyone out and you have too much stuff on your plate, from the outside, you're going to look like MVP, you know, like most valuable person in the organization. Yeah. But what does a balloon do at a certain stage of being too majestic? It blows out, it pops. Yeah. And it's very much the same and we can start with the work environment, because I think this is where a lot of us are experiencing this, especially during the lockdown. I think a lot of us expected when we went to the work from home levels and stuff like that, that would be more comfortable. You know, you'll be able to be in your house environment. You can wear a suit and tie on top and be in your jocks at the bottom on video cameras and stuff, which I've done several times, even if it's just for giggles. And it would just be nice and comfortable and better, you know. But what I very quickly realized is now I used to go to maybe 3 meetings in a day, situated 40 kilometers apart, climb in my car, get time in the car to cool off from the previous meeting and get my bearings for the next meeting. A lot of companies now is starting to do back-to-back meetings. I've noticed in our company as well that we will even do like 25-minute meetings, you know, like literally stacking them so that you've got like 11 or 12 meetings a day with those small little 5-minute gaps there, specifically crafted to literally go and take a bathroom break, get yourself a cup of coffee, have a cigarette, whatever your 5 minutes is going to consist of, and immediately back to back go into the next one. We share our calendars with all of our colleagues. They literally go and look for an open spot in your calendar and just slap a slot in there, not thinking about, wow, he just came out of a meeting, probably wants to take a bit of time and just look at his emails. It's a weird culture, and it's in our company, but it's not unique to us by any stretch of the imagination. All of my mates and stuff that work in the information technology industry have exactly the same issue. And what's just happening is we've started taking on more because of the comfort level of, and just being able to do so much so easily in front of like a Zoom session or Teams or whatever your fix is. But we've now created a new expectation from the employers as well. They know you can churn out 12 meetings a day, plus keep your emails up to date, plus run projects and Q&As and all the other stuff, whatever your work is, right? And that is the silent killer, because you, like you just said, I'm also the kind of person, please come to me if you need help. I'm going to help you. I'll take on more stuff. I'll take on more stuff at my own expense most of the times. And at the same time, I need to start being a little bit, and I figured this out also like you did during a couple of times where I was near burnout. I need to start being way more aware of when do I start seeing cracks in my own surface, so that I can prevent the balloon from bursting completely and ending up in a mental institution or something like that.
That is the best metaphor, because what that basically says is that you evaluate your life and identify your weakest point, because that is the point that's gonna, where the balloon's gonna pop, where the pressure is gonna be released from, right? And you definitely don't want that weakest point being your relationship with your wife or with your significant other. You definitely don't want that being your financial situation, or you don't want that being your family and your relationship with your family and your friends. You don't want those foundations cracking, and you don't want that cracking because of work pressure or things, too much complexity being added on top of the already complex situation that you're dealing with, or situations that you continuously deal with. I think it is so important. And I think that when we're talking about work-life balance, I think the one thing that we thought would come out of this working from home situation would be you could have a better work-life balance, because now instead of waiting till the weekend to get your laundry done, you can quickly put in a load, quickly hang it up during your lunch hour, every second day or whatever, and so you have a lot more flexibility. That's what we thought. But with these back-to-back meetings and everything, because you don't have the time in a car, the usual commute time is now accounted for and directed towards the kind of work that you need to do. So now you've got an extra 2 hours a day that you all of a sudden have to put in hardcore focus in. And so I think when we bring in the financial and the relationship aspect of that as well, I think it is so important for us to realize that those things, the work pressure and everything, gets all of that pushes down on the foundation that is your relationship with your significant other, that is your relationship with your kids. Because if we're feeling this overwhelm, we're feeling this burnout, do we not take that out on the kids? Do we not take that out on the people around? We can't help ourselves. Exactly. We can't help ourselves. That's just human nature, right? We can't hold everything inside. So those things definitely put massive impact on your personal relationships and your personal life in general as well.
And I think I've experienced that. And the one of the terrible things that comes with me when I get overworked or overburdened at a certain stage, right before I realize there's burnout or there's overwhelm completely, when I'm just very, very overworked for like maybe 2 weeks at a time, I'll start lashing out at all my closest people. And I would then not only lash out at them, but I would also defend my position, and say that it's not my fault I'm busy. It's not my fault I need to put food on the table. It's not my fault that, I earn more than you and I need to do all of this for my work. And if I lose my job, then we are all in trouble. And saying all those really, really hurtful things just to defend your lack of dealing with your pressures, and that's, I think, one of the most harmful things about burnout is what you do and the things that you say when you burn out, or when you reach overwhelm, and how you actually express your feelings at that time is super irrational, right? Because you, in one frame of mind, I'm proud of the fact that I'm doing so much for my company, and that's why I feel I should defend my position as working so freaking hard, But there shouldn't be that much pride in just working hard. It's one thing to work hard, but it's a different story to do something that you love, do something that you're passionate about. That doesn't just constitute you being busy. That shouldn't be the end goal, is that you've got to work that has you 8 hours a day fixated on a screen, intensely working. If that was the end goal of a career, then I think I missed the mark completely. And I think when I realized that, I started realizing that I should never ever be so busy to the point of burnout and think that that's a cool thing. My job is really keeping me busy. I need to figure out how to fix it. And that's, I think, what we need to talk about next is, what do you do? At the end of the day, you've got a boss. He's going to pack stuff on your table. He's going to tell you to do stuff. You've created expectations maybe of what you are capable of, etc. What do you do?
I think it all starts with prioritization, understanding what are you currently working with, what are these external, so basically identifying the external forces that's putting pressure on this foundation of yours, what is leading to the feeling of burnout or overwhelm, right? And as you mentioned earlier on as well, it's extremely important to identify a lot of the markers, the red flags, sooner rather than later, because when you reach burnout, it's almost too late. It almost instantly becomes so much harder to deal with that and to bounce back from that. So identifying the signs early on, I think, is definitely key there. But I think it needs to start with prioritization, understanding that, what are my priorities? And those things might change over some time during the course of your life. At least for me, it has, right? So it might be that you're super focused on getting your career back on track or expanding or growing within your career. So a few things might have to take the backseat for a little while, not forever, just for the next 6 months or next year or so, maybe even the next 2 years. I'm not going to be focused too much on my relationship per se, because that has a solid foundation. I'm happy, she's happy, everything's good. The home situation, the family situation, everything is under control. But for now, the priority needs to be my work, but also understanding that the second priority would be, what is my physical well-being or what is my relationships well-being. So prioritizing, I think, is where one would start with that, because as soon as you start prioritizing, you need to understand what is it that's demanding my energy, what is it that's demanding my efforts, and how much of it can I give based off of those priorities that I've set for myself.
And I think what's important about the prioritization exercise is, once you are in the fog of war, so you're just busy working at getting things done, right, and you don't look at prioritizing anything, very often you're busy with stupid stuff that you're not even supposed to necessarily touch. As soon as you start prioritizing, you'll have a list on the one side of, this is not really my job kind of stuff, or this should fall in another department, or this falls outside of scope for me. And what comes with prioritization is a very open dialogue with management, so being able to go back to management and explain that, listen, this is the core things that you need me to do, right? We still agree on this. Okay, cool. So these are my priority stuff. These are the things that I've inherited, onboarded, helped out on when I shouldn't have, perhaps, or whatever, that are second, third, and fourth priorities, and maybe even out of scope, so that they are at least aware that you still know what your core focus should be. Because if you fail at that, no matter how much work you do, the boss is still going to fire you if you fail at your core functionality, right? So try and then, by prioritizing, if you work it from the back, you're going to find a lot of different tasks and things in your day that's completely unnecessary, or that's completely relevant to someone else that you can hand off or pass off to the correct departments, right? And once you've started with your prioritization and you know which are your major priorities to get through the day, you need to start thinking about planning correctly, right? That's the very next step that you need to go into. Once you've got your firm priorities that you have to get done, the job keepers, the things that are going to make you keep your job at the end of the day, because that's priority number one, is to just keep your job, then to impress, right? It shouldn't be to be just so impressive, but then maybe you'd fail at a lot of things in the background. So keeping your job, core functionality, prioritize that, start planning immediately. Okay, I'm very effective between 9 and 11 in the morning, so I'm going to slot that into that area of my day, and this is how I'm going to run things, this is how I'm going to run the project, this is how I'm going to arrange my keyboard, my screen, I'm going to have a coffee, I'm going to do all of that little niggly things that's going to get you through that commanding and prioritized first activity that you need to get through. If you've got things that suck, but they are part of your core function, get them out the way. This is one of the things that I've always preached, is every work is not only going to be passion, there's always going to be admin or Excel. I freaking hate Excel, but it is part of my job and it is part of my core job. Get those things done when you set foot in the office. Like, just get it out of your head so that you don't have it bearing weight over your shoulder. It's going to cloud over the rest of the day if you don't get away from it, right? And that's how you start the planning process. I don't know if you agree. How do you do your planning?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. Beyond just identifying what are the urgent tasks, getting in the tough ones and getting them done, and also prioritizing your particular tasks at hand, or at least the things that demand your energy on a constant basis. I think a big part of planning for me is identifying things that will cause burnout in the future at a very early stage. Looking into not just the task and saying, okay, yeah, this is a small task. And I'll put it into an example, right? I used to fix a lot of my friends' and family's computers for them, right? And I got to a point where I would just volunteer. I would be like, oh, okay, great. Yeah, how's your computer doing since the last time I checked it out? And they're like, oh, actually, there was this little thing that popped up the other. You know what I'm saying, right? And then you volunteer yourself, your time, your energy, and all of a sudden they start talking to their friends and their friends and their friends, and they all expect you. Exactly. Yeah. It creates an expectation. So by identifying those things and thinking strategically from the get-go, and I used a very simple example, right? But this can be applied to your personal life. It can be applied to your work life. It can be applied to your friends, your family, your relationship, all of those things. Managing expectations to such a point where you're not always a yes man, really looking at the future and what that would mean. And even if it comes to a pressure point where you have to get something done for someone, to do them a favor because they're in a dire situation, to set the expectations and to maintain and manage those expectations from a very early stage of that relationship or of that particular task in your work or whatever the case is, to say that this is as much leeway that I have, as much energy as I have, as much time as I have in a given day, and this is how much I'm willing to sacrifice or dedicate to this, and that's all. That's it. You got to set those expectations, and I think that's a very, very key and crucial part to the planning process. I think a big part to planning, or the very next step to planning, is compartmentalizing what goes on within your life.
Yeah, that's super important, dude. I think what we need to understand, and I think this was something I read a while back, I can't remember exactly where, but it really doesn't matter how rich you are, how good looking you are, how sporty you are, how whatever good things in life you have, we all have a set amount of time. We all have 24 hours in a day, no matter how poor or how rich. That does not change. So you need to make sure that that time works to your life, your happiness, your fulfillment in life, and what you want to achieve in life, right? And I've realized many things that I do, I carry on my sleeve and I carry it around me. It's kind of just been the way that I've been put together, and it's my DNA, my coding. So by compartmentalizing, I used to watch this series around SWAT teams and how they are able to shut off their personal life, their wife at home, their kids, everything. Even their parents that might be suffering cancer or something, they can completely shut that off, go into a mission, perhaps kill people there, come back, shut the personal life switch back on, and forget about the mission, like completely. And we need to teach ourselves, condition ourselves, and we talk about mindfulness a lot, and that's probably the key, is becoming more mindful about your life and being extremely intentional when you leave your desk, for example, after work, if it's at your home, at your office, when you go down and you greet your kids, you do it wholeheartedly in family mode. And you forget about work.
Yeah, that's
even
so
if
important.
and this is the hard part, even if you're busy with a project and you were struggling with a problem that day that you couldn't resolve in time for the clock to strike 5 o'clock, and you have to go down, shut it off. The chances are quite good, and this has worked for me in the past, where I shut it off, I play chess with my daughter, we watch a series or whatever, we spend some time, I go sleep. I wake up the morning and I've fixed the problem in my head somehow. I come up with the answers the next morning, and I spent quality time with my kids. I didn't bring that frustration. I didn't sit there completely in my own world amongst my family, where they can clearly see my eyes are drifting and I'm thinking of other things and I'm still at work and I'm thinking of solving stuff, which obviously then constitutes to friction, and you and your wife may be falling out because they're not stupid. They can detect that you haven't switched off, that you're somewhere else, that you're not invested in the conversations with your kids and so on. So compartmentalizing, I think, if you can crack that, it's the hardest part, I think, because that takes very, very hard and intensive mindfulness to get it right. But that would be the key to not burning out.
Absolutely. I think it's so important. And even if you talk about it in the tech space as well, this is something that we all do. You know, when we're talking about securing environments, securing networks and everything, is making sure that you compartmentalize those networks so that the threats, the malicious things don't spill over. Exactly. So that if something goes wrong in that compartment or that department or that network segment, it doesn't actually fall over or touch any of your other devices on the network. And that is, I think, it makes so much sense in your own personal life. I think it is so much harder because we're talking about feelings and emotions, and it's all part of being a human, and that we cannot really touch or see it or anything, but we have to identify it and be able to control it. Absolutely insightful, Leon. I think we have to get to the most crucial part of the episode today, which, as always, is going to teach us how do we go about applying this to our lives. And this is where we switch over to the real life tip.
No Mask Monday.
For today. That was cool, man. That's going to sound really cool in post-edit. I'm going to love that. Okay, cool, Liam. So we have unpacked so much here today, and I think burnout and the topic of overwhelm in the day and age that we live in is absolutely crucial. Understanding what your limits are, understanding how much leeway and how much energy, how much time you have in a day, and how much you can give to a certain task, and how to just strike a decent balance where you're performing at your maximum capacity, but also not overperforming and overpromising and over-dedicating yourself to things that will lead to burnout, because that's going to spill over to your foundation. Your foundation being your financial status or your financial stability, relationships with your friends or with your spouse, your significant other. Understanding that those things are your foundation in life, and putting these external pressures on, it's going to start cracking the foundation, and it's going to start leaking out somewhere. Understanding that our lives are basically like a balloon, and that we can only take so much before we're going to start cracking in certain departments in our lives, right? So now that we've covered all of that, Leon, how can we go about applying this to our lives? I think that we have covered a lot when we talked about the planning, the prioritizing, the compartmentalizing as well. But what is your one tip or two key takeaways for how we can get started with applying this to our lives to avoid overwhelm and burnout?
So the first tip that I have, I've only got 2 for today, but the first tip that I have has to do with our episode that we did about saying no and how to say no. You need to start getting better at effective communication, not just with you and your wife. Obviously, that will be beneficial as well. But especially with management, they more than likely respect you more for saying no than saying yes to everything. But when I say effective communication, I'm not saying, hell no, I don't have time for that, and then walking out, right, and slamming the door. I'm not saying that. I'm talking about that, the way that you convey the message, the fact that you constantly communicating with your manager, that person knows what stress you're under even before he asks you for another thing, so that it doesn't come as a surprise to him that you can't take on more. And more than that, that he actually is constantly aware of the extra things that you do to make things work, and that you are already exceeding on what you are supposed to do. So it's got to do with saying no, saying it in a nice way and in an effective way, and having that open communication with your manager or your direct line, so that they are constantly aware of your position and that you are perhaps overworked, even though you are okay and you are calm and you are handling it, but they can have that compassion, that empathy, and they won't just expect you to do more if you just create the expectation and keep quiet. The second tip that I've got, and this is something I learned from you, Mr. Marnu, and I still suck at this, but I do find whenever I employ this from time to time in my life, that everything just falls a little bit better into place, is get a planner, get something like Trello, get a book, get a calendar, get something, right? And start putting stuff on paper in an organized fashion with times and dates and deadlines, etc., and start managing your life as you would a project it's also going to make sure that you don't miss anything. Because what I've started realizing is I get so busy that I don't prioritize. I don't get time to do any of what we just discussed. Then I end up forgetting important stuff.
Yeah.
I end up forgetting that my daughter has netball on a Saturday morning, and it's important if that's going to start happening, because that concept is human, to start forgetting stuff because your mind is too full. Get a crutch, get a tool, get an app, get Trello, get a book. I kind of like sometimes just writing things down even, and put it on paper, remind yourself, and organize things in that fashion. And I think by doing that, you'll always, at least if you are working hard, you'll feel that even though you are on the point of burnout, you do have control. You know what's coming, you know what's gone, you know what needs to happen next, even though it's a lot. And that, I think, is already part of the battle.
That is such good advice. I think from my point of view, I've got 2 tips as well. Absolutely crucial, I think, to start off with identifying the 5 stages of burnout. What are the 5 stages that one goes through? So this has a little bit of research tied into it. Nice. It says that you first experience the honeymoon phase. This is where everything is good, life is great, everything you're coping, all of that, right? Then comes the onset of the stress phase. The stress phase is where you start experiencing stress every second day. Every second day you're okay. Every second day you're a little bit stressed out, but you're sort of still coping and everything still feels fine. Then you start reaching a stage that they call the chronic stress phase, right? Oh, yes. And this is where you constantly feel stress. Every single day, day in, day out, you're feeling the stress, you're feeling the pressure, you're trying your best to cope with everything, and then you start hitting the 4th phase, which is the burnout phase. The burnout phase is where you actually become numb to everything around you. You literally have no more motivation in you to get anything done. You don't function as you normally would, right? You're not as motivated. You struggle to motivate and pick yourself back up. You suffer from self-doubt. This is something that has absolutely spilled over to my personal life so many times, where I start doubting myself in my personal life just because of the work stress that I'm. So that's an indication, an early sign that you've already reached the 4th stage or the 4th phase, which is the burnout phase. And then the 5th one is the habitual burnout phase. This is where you literally start experiencing chronic headaches or stomach issues. It starts spilling over to your physical health, right? It's something that becomes a part of who you are as a person. And that's what I was talking about earlier on. You want to make sure that you identify these things and put a stop to it as soon as possible, because once it gets to chronic or the habitual burnout phase, you're definitely going to struggle to pull yourself back out of that ditch as well.
Then you're quite far gone.
So that's my first tip. I think as a second tip here, we spoke a lot about planning and prioritizing, right? The one effective strategy that I came across that I've actually applied to my own life is something called the Eisenhower priority matrix. And it basically says, if you've got so many tasks, because everything is always urgent, we all experience this. This is urgent, that is urgent, this. How do you stop prioritizing, right? Go and have a look at the Eisenhower priority matrix. I will link something out for you guys in the show notes as well. But it basically goes, number 1, identifying what is urgent and important. Number 2, identifying what is not urgent, but it is important. Number 3, what is urgent, but it's not important. And number 4, what is not urgent and not important. If you need to go back, go listen to that again, but I will link it out for you guys. But that's an effective strategy to really start identifying what are the things that are urgent and important. Let me get that done. Okay, what's next on the list? The things that are not urgent, but it is also important. And then anything that goes in the 3rd one, we can sort of put off for a little while, that goes, it's urgent, but it's not important. But anything in the 4th quadrant, let's chuck that out the window. We don't need, obviously it's not important, it's not urgent. So why am I even stressing about it? Chuck that out, get rid of it, because it's literally just consuming energy and your time and clogging your brain. Yeah. So those are my 2 tips, Leon. Absolutely great stuff, I think, came out of this. I think it is a very important topic for us to discuss, especially in this day and age. On a lighter note, we are mask free, so that's going to be great.
Oh, dude.
That's going to be super,
I'm going to go walk
great.
around and just, now I can't pull faces to people in the shops anymore.
But there you guys have it. Everything that you need to know about how to avoid overwhelm and burnout. And just as a last note, if you want to refer back to the episode that Leon mentioned, it's episode number 62, The Art of Saying No. Super important. So go ahead, go listen back to that one if you've missed it. I think it will shed a lot of light as to how to start saying no to those things that demand your energy that you literally don't have any overhead for. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we enjoyed being back here with you guys, and we look forward to seeing you on the very next episode next week. Until then, this is me signing off, Mono.
Joined by Leon as usual. Stay safe out there. We'll see you on the next episode. Cheers, bye.
What's up, guys and girls? If you've derived some great value from our show thus far, please take a second to rate and review us on the platform that you're tuned in on. This will really help us to grow the show and reach more and more people, to spread the positivity and change more and more lives. So it will literally just take you a second to rate and review us, and who knows, perhaps you could directly be responsible for changing someone's life today. We look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Until then, cheers.